Audio back up. Audio is beautiful again. And then allow me to bring. You hear me back?
Hmm?
Good. Okay. Good. Let me go ahead and go to it. All right. So now we're good. So now, yeah, you're live. You're on with me now. Okay. So, Digital Liberation Front. Wednesday, October 2nd, 2019. So today we actually have a couple things. One is we're going to be going over Civil War II, what some fascists call Civil War II Electric Boogaloo. So I don't know if you know, but there is a bunch of like Day of the Rope, Civil War, basically apocalyptic a language behind what Trump has been talking about recently in regard to, impeachment bringing out civil war. So I want to kind of go over that. I want to go over what's happened this past week and some of the craziness because we're starting to ramp up in regard to impeachment. But I also want to go over what this whole concept of civil war is, and basically illustrate the fact that it's not really a war in a traditional sense. It's basically the most ultimate fascist propaganda designed to, motivate people to do some, basically screwed up shit to other Americans. And it's dangerous rhetoric. So I want to go over that. I want to talk about that. So yeah, so Bex, how have you been? I know that you dealt with some stuff. We can talk. I do want to talk about that too. I did post a link, so George may pop up in our feed. But yeah, like how have you been? How have you been?
I'm good. It's been good. I'm cooking some chicken right now.
Okay. Good. So so the timeout that you got, like, how long?
Yeah, asshole got me 7 days. I can't go on Messenger.
Oh. Messenger too?
It's okay.
Damn.
That's okay.
Real talk. How many infractions has this been for you?
I've had a lot of infractions because I spammed the one group with some. Apparently, there was nudity involved in some of the spam.
Oh, I remember that one. So basically,
I got like 5 infractions off of that one.
Okay, all right. So
and the pictures were only meant to shock and make you think twice. Where Brandon go?
I'm right here. That was, Bass, is that you? Is that your feed?
Yeah, that's me. I'm trying to cut the sound back off.
Okay. So you had the infraction. It was because you posted that picture of Trump with the face, but instead of a nose, he had like a flat. He had a flaccid penis. The penis nose.
My daughter just came in the room. Was I gonna really say what it was?
Okay. I recall. Okay, so that so that ban happened. So that got you knocked off, and then basically going up against the trolls in FSG.
Yeah, George's pussy ass couldn't take the fact that I said masturbates to your picture at night. That's what he couldn't take. Gotcha.
And
he didn't enjoy it, apparently.
Gotcha. So things got extra.
That's what got me.
So so basically what we ended up dealing with. Hey Sarah, what's going on? Can you hear me? Can you hear us? I think she can. Hey. Okay. So that's what went down. So, but you recognize that was a trap, right? You recognize that. I mean, one of the things about the group.
Now I do, because I tagged him and everything. I know now what I did that I could have avoided.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of the main reasons why. Yeah, I did. But I mean, the thing is, I want people to understand, or want people to know, whenever they're going up against, like, these people, that you're dealing with bad actors. Like, they have no. I was just having a discussion today about the groups and what they're for. Like, it gives you the impression, or it gives you the illusion, that whenever you join this group, you're going to be. What is that noise? When you join these groups, it's going to be a situation where you're going to have, like, intelligent, honest debate, and everybody's going to have, like,
discussions and
yeah.
If you're right, you're right. If you're wrong, you're wrong.
Yeah, and people are just people accept facts and move on. And this is one of the main reasons why I really wanted to have Sarah, on, because I think it's really, really, really interesting from a mental health perspective, when it comes to how these people interact in the groups, how we interact with one another. Because I don't want to just put this down as, like, oh, the left acts like this and oh, the right acts like that. There's a huge divide in our country that is fueling this Civil War II rhetoric. And so that's what I'm saying, is there a way, Sarah, for us to, like, heal the divide, for us to come across the aisle and, come back to a place of kumbaya? Do you feel? Because I know you're more optimistic than I am, but go ahead. Do you feel?
I mean, I personally believe there is a way. I think it's going to take a lot of work. I mean, I definitely don't. I can't. I mean, there's no comparison, but I haven't been able to involve myself as much within the conversations in the rooms as much as you have, Brandon. And I see Rebecca chiming in a whole lot too, which I think is great. So I think it's possible, but just like I would tell someone sitting on my couch in my office, it takes work and it takes commitment. So you're willing to do the work. It's going to be challenging.
Okay. So you think? So the argument is that, not the argument, but the statement, because we're not arguing here. Nobody's arguing. Nobody's fighting. Nobody has any beef. But the statement that you're making is that if the Trump supporters are willing to do the work,
and if we're willing to do the work, I mean, you're willing to do the work too.
Okay.
But we had conversations about my perspective on, like, how the work is approached, because I have my own, like, perspective on why I think the Trump supporters have become the way that they are. Mm-hmm. There is purpose in going hard back at them and giving them a taste of their own medicine, but I personally believe that, like, slow and steady wins the race, essentially.
Okay. So,
can I comment though?
Yeah, go ahead. Come on in.
All right, so I got to be honest with you. I feel like when it comes to bringing anybody together on any of these topics, we have to look at the root of the problem. And the root of the problem is that nobody is willing to have the conversation about race.
Okay.
And,
I mean, they don't
yeah, but you got to understand, that's an I thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Everybody has to be willing to be uncomfortable. Yeah. Everybody has to be willing to be uncomfortable to change. Yeah. And in order for that to happen, we have to create spaces where we can actually dialogue about race, and or for really, like, the lack of what that really is. There's no such thing as race.
Yeah.
It's a tool used to categorize people based on, the color of their skin and socially, and that right there has led to so many other issues. But that's where the root of the problem has started, and it has always been that case, because these same instances are going on, and now it's trickling from what we consider African Americans and Black people to Latinos and other people from other nationalities, Muslims. Mm-hmm. Like, all of that is transcending across all of these different groups, and now everybody's starting to see that they're not immune to what we've been already dealing with.
True.
And it's like, I honestly, like, I spent a lot of time in with school and everything organizing these conversations, and I've actually put together a press release if anybody's interested in viewing that.
I am. But you got a digital form? You got a digital form we can, like,
yeah, I might be able to share it on here.
Okay. Okay,
so
yeah.
Give me a second and I'll go through that when y'all keep
But
going.
I would agree with you is that the conversation does need to happen. The variable here is that we're in such a sensitive, everybody's in such a sensitive area. I mean, I see so much personalization, and that's where, where I stand in my approach is that you have to be wary of that. You can't dance around it because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, I get that people's feelings will play into it at some point, but there needs to be some sensitivity on the other hand about the person trying to have the other side of the conversation in order to have any type of conversation.
I guess
yes, the conversation does need to happen. It just needs to go about being in a place and in a tone that is not going to run people away.
I guess that's my other question too. Is like because I mean it's interesting that Bass brought that up, and you too, Sarah. But the whole question to me is you were talking about there being another side. There being another side, and I feel like we are getting to a place where it's difficult to find out. I mean, like, what would be that? Tell me what that other side is. Like you're talking about, we need to respect the other side. Is the other side, quote unquote white people? Is the other side, white supremacists? Is the other side, people who support and endorse the construct of race and believe that's what we need to focus on, reinforcing? What is the other side in your opinion?
I mean, it could be anything, honestly, depending on the conversation. It could be just from me to you. I'm different than you are. So if I have to approach the table with a concept of understanding, seeking to understand something different than what I already know in order to have any type of conversation about it. And that's where, like, if you go ahead and you come out, arms flailing and run people off from that conversation, then there's not going to be any kind of, I mean, like, I've told him that before, so in my defense, like,
I've heard this.
Come at, these people are super sensitive. This is like, deep, in my perspective, this is deep rooted. This goes back to the grounding. I mean, if I'm bring it back to it, like the grounding that they got from their parents and the shame that they felt, it goes way back. And there are just layers on top of layers of that, because then that influences people's behavior to reinforce everything that they feel in that moment. Okay. So this is like, especially if you got someone who's like 70 years old. I mean, I personally believe an old dog can learn new tricks. It's just going to take a hell of a lot of time and commitment.
I mean, that's the other thing too. I guess that's the other grounding force, is, you just like you said, time. Like, how much, like if we had an infinite span of time, we had an infinite amount of individuals, that we had at our disposal who could go out and be, Trump whisperers, and, we could just send them out in squads. We just go into wherever and tell these people, look. What were you saying, Rebecca?
No, I'm just saying we got to find a Trump whisperer. Yeah. You can whisper to them, but I'm saying my own parents are Trump supporters. I can't talk about it with them.
Right. But you guys also have like such an intertwined relationship, is that if you talk about something that provides so much conflict, then generalization gets kicked in for a lot of people. Is like, oh, if we have one conflict, that it goes throughout our whole relationship and then things break. So it's like we just stop talking about it. Because emotions involved. When emotions involved, it gets messy. And most of our society today fears emotion to the point where we either restrict it or avoid it, or we don't know, like we are enthralled in it and then we don't know how to stop it.
Can I?
The last conversation with either of them, it was bad. It was loud. Yeah. It was a loud fight. I'm a fight with my old frail parents. Like, I'm not trying to do that, but I'm not going to change what I believe. Yeah,
of course, and I wouldn't expect it to. And sometimes, like, if you're especially with a family relationship, that relationship may stand where it needs to be. And that's where, like, it's a complicated,
you're not going to change
a complicated dynamic.
What were you saying, Bass? What were you saying, Bass? You were trying to say something?
Yeah.
I think he's talking.
I think you're on mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I see
Sorry.
them.
Oh, there you go. All right, here
I
it
cut
goes.
the audio off by accident. I was gonna say leave the politics out of it. The approach that I feel like needs to be taken is something that everybody can relate on. And what is the one thing that undeniably everybody can relate on?
Pain.
No,
M-
everybody can relate on pain.
Okay.
Nobody has the same experiences.
Well, yeah, but pain is the reaction to those experiences. Suffering is universal.
That's something a little bit more surface level.
Okay. Well, see, I'm a therapist. I go deep very quickly.
But see, I can't understand the experiences of a woman who might have experienced certain traumas as a child.
I get that.
I can empathize with her.
What it's like to be a black man in America.
True.
Right.
But what you can relate to me with is that you eat food, right?
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So if we take a look at how food generates these same topics, everything will become so much more clear to everybody.
Are you saying
Everybody will be able to find those commonalities because racism plays a part in not only poverty, but it also plays it in food security. It plays it in food sovereignty. It plays it in these food deserts, but we don't even really want to call them that because food deserts also have a racial undertone. So we have to look at things from a way that everybody can relate to it and bring them together in that sense. Nobody's gonna fight over food. You give them some food, get their stomachs full, give them a template, and then you have a conversation from there.
So we need to have
that template.
We need to have a big ass cookout.
You can't come in from out of nowhere where nobody's gonna understand your context or what you're feeling or what you're thinking, and expect someone to understand. It has to be something like, okay, for example, part of the press release is I'm going to show everybody a short documentary that I did with my dissertation. And it revolves around looking at black farmers who are out here and teaching young African-American youth about agriculture, bringing them into it. Well, then that's going to question, why do we even need this? Why am I so pressed to even bring this information out? Because there's an issue within the food system itself. And so that right there kind of like coerces everybody into the topic of race. And then you can expand from there. But you can't have it like, oh, I got this and I want you to feel the way I feel. No. I don't want you to feel the way I feel. I want us to be able to communicate and understand where each other is coming from.
So what are you saying, Bex?
I said we need to be able to understand where each other is.
I just said food wants everybody to be.
Rebecca, what did you say?
That's all. I just said you wouldn't want everybody to be miserable. I was agreeing with you.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want people to feel if you're miserable.
Exactly. But you also have to come in there with the mindset that, look, this is still going to be uncomfortable for whoever because this is going to seem one-sided. We can't argue that white privilege doesn't exist. It does.
Well, then that's another thing too. Is like, it's like what Sarah is saying as well, in regard to addressing emotion. I guess this is the paradox. Like, how do we discuss the destructive power that is race that's created this monster that we're dealing with right now that's come into how do we engage that? Like, how do we unlearn that? And then how do we even with all the food, like even if we had a great Trump supporter cookout and we invited every single Trump supporter we knew and we sat down and we broke bread, at the end of the day, when it comes down to going into that uncomfortable space, how do we tell people, like, look, the shit that y'all have been believing in regard to, like, superiority of races, whether it be, black, Native American, Hispanic, whatever, all these different labels that we've come up with, it's all bullshit, and it's actually preventing us from, moving forward and addressing these issues. And like Sarah says, it's going to take time, but we understand, like, there's certain aspects that we're facing in regard to our survival as human beings where it's just difficult for us to negotiate or find that time for us to say, okay, I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time to work with these kids. I don't have a lot of time to work with these other individuals and go over, the history of race, what it means to be black, what it means to be white. Like, there's a bunch of time that we don't have if we're talking about climate change, if we're talking about, global warming, we're talking about, like, food scarcity. That's where teaching people how to grow is beneficial, but at the same time, too, like, what does it mean do we have the time? Do we have the time to do this educating? Sarah?
Well, I think if we don't give ourselves credit for the time that we do have to do some educating, then we're not going to get anywhere very quickly. Now, I agree with Bass in saying that there are a lot of, in his idea that will work, that is a way to bring people together, because to be honest with you, most people fear, like, I just went pretty deep pretty quickly, and most people don't like to do that.
Yeah.
And so food is one of those ways to bring people together to the conversation. But there are some components where, I mean, if anything, if you can start teaching something to someone, would just be like how you uphold the sense of understanding for where they're coming from, and actually hearing and listening. Because most people, all they're doing is they just want to be heard. They want what they're saying to be acknowledged and to have some sort of validation to whatever, whether or not you agree it's right or wrong. So if you don't do what you can, then you're likely not to do anything at all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we need to do something. Something needs to be done. We shouldn't just
so that's why I've told you, is that there is purpose in coming and, fighting that fight that you do, and kicking back, because, hate is hate, and that's not something I'm saying that you should understand and respect. I'm saying that it's coming from somewhere, and that's what I believe that will be understood and respect. But you'll lose people, especially the middle people. Like anybody, if I had to put a term on it, it would be like your independents, the people who are, they've got too much going on so they just don't pay attention at all. And that's where I guess I gravitate towards, where I see the most change to be like. And with my approach is that you can do more is because they're not open and they're not closed to what you're trying to sell.
Okay, hold on. So, Rebecca, you were talking about your relationship with your mom and your dad, and basically like the difficulty that you've been having in regard to reaching them, or the emotional, so how would somebody like Rebecca engage her parents, tell me some of the difficulty that you have negotiated or you've dealt with in regard to dealing with them.
Because they get angry and defensive immediately, especially my dad. Like, we were having a discussion with my mom, who gets a little upset if she feels attacked. I'm not trying to attack, I'm trying to explain things to her. And my dad came in on the conversation and immediately, got in our face, like he wanted to fight us, physically. My dad's a big guy. He wanted to fight us, and he was screaming, he was screaming across the room, "You want anarchy!" Literally with his fist in the air. They don't get the middle of it. It's always an extreme idea they have of the left, and the ideals of the left, and they want to kill babies, and they want to have sex with everybody, and they want to be gay, and they want, you know what I mean? It's just you can't convince them otherwise. So they think that I have fallen in a way as a person. They have raised me like that. Even though I don't do all that, you know what I'm saying?
So basically, Sarah,
they don't know me anymore.
So Sarah, when you're engaging somebody like that, basically, we're talking about somebody who is in a position where, they are, I don't want to call her parents, hysterical or anything like that, but, they have extreme views, extreme cemented views, and you're trying to engage them and try to find some kind of common ground, but even before you've opened your mouth, they already have this idea about the messenger that, they're going to shut you off or shut you down regardless. Like,
right. So I guess my question, and it's kind of to you, Rebecca, but maybe also about what you're describing, is like, so they're their argument is, well, we didn't raise you like that. So how do you see that they raised you that gives you kind of purpose? Am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here. 1 second.
Okay, sorry. My screen changed.
Yeah, my screen changed too. My bad.
That gives you purpose within your argument that you are making to them. So how did that raise you?
Go ahead, Jack. I'm looking at
going like
Bass's screen, sharing his screen real quick. Yeah. Okay.
oh right now.
But no, I can hear you. I can hear you. Hold on a second.
Everybody back on?
Yeah. Let me get you back on.
Okay. The one thing I did get out of it, like out of our religion, like how I was raised to believe, and I even have the tattoo on my arm, be loved, is what our religion is supposed to be about as a born again Christian. Is we're supposed to love one another. We're supposed to care about each other, and it shouldn't matter anything about the person. Like, you're supposed to show love. You're supposed to give to, kind of did the whole Jesus thing.
Yeah.
How he wouldn't be a Republican. He would be a Democrat because he wants to help. He wants to feed the needy. He doesn't think anybody should be starving or go without. In fact, like, a rich man can't get through the eye of a needle. Or it would be like a rich person would be like getting through an eye of a needle.
Mm-hmm.
A camel getting through the eye of a needle to get into the kingdom of heaven. Can you please stop so I can think about what I'm saying? Thank you. And I do believe a lot of those things as concepts. You know what I'm saying? And that's how you should be. And that's how they taught me as a child. But now they turn around, and as I'm an adult and I see things and I'm like, this isn't right. This isn't how you're acting. You're not being Christians. So why should I behave like a Christian or call myself one if you call yourself one and you're behaving like this?
Right. And so the reason I asked that question is because a lot of the times people were on, like, we can have very similar beliefs, but they present very differently. But when we start throwing the, like, no, you're wrong, no, because it doesn't align with what I'm saying or what I'm believing, that's where the emotion comes from. So if you can give them what they gave you from the get-go, and because clearly you think that they're hypocrites based off of what they gave you, well, that's my interpretation.
Oh, yeah. And especially even in how they raised me with a lot of anger and punishment as opposed to love. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So if you can give what your knowledge is and present it in a way that stays in your lane but is right up next to theirs and pushes back as we cross over, that's how I would go about doing that. And that's what I believe in. I mean, that's what I encourage and teach people in, like, within my profession, is that you have to keep your individuality, and there's something about it is that's your lane, that's your territory, that's where you're supposed to be, and that's where what you should own. The other person's the same way, whether you agree with them or not. And change can only happen change happens if one person can change in that. So without stepping over into someone else is causing the reaction, there's your emotion right there. Then you're able to bring your perspective. They may still react. I'm not saying that it's going to be foolproof the first couple of times, but instead of, I guess that looks like, instead of saying, well, I don't, you're wrong, or I don't think you're right, you're just like, I don't believe in that. And I don't understand how what you taught me makes sense.
Okay.
That.
Bass, I want to talk to you a little bit about, like, you present a document. I'll put it in the feed for the piece, because if you bring it on, the viewers may not be able to see it because it doesn't show up in the image. But I do want to talk to you about, like, what you're speaking about in regard to, just the construct of race, and how do we engage people and let them know, or basically address the repercussions or the effects of race, but at the same time not reinforce the structure. Like, if you recognize that the structure is flawed, how do you approach it in a way that's respectful of the consequences of it, but at the same time not reinforcing it further. I feel like that's the biggest paradox that we're dealing with when we deal with race.
I can only speak from my own personal experience, man. I mean, granted, I understand where y'all are coming from, but that just hasn't been my experience with it. I feel like it really has to do with your approach. There's nothing wrong with stating the obvious, saying the truth. I mean, it is what it is, and I think that to an extent, we all got to deal with it, you know. And then that's the other thing too. I can sit here and say deal with it all day because guess what? I deal with it every day. You know, I have to confront this every day, unknowingly, unconsciously, consciously, physically, mentally, emotionally. I mean, these are all things that I have to consider on a daily basis every day I wake up. But to request someone to hear me out for an hour of their time and entertain the thought, I don't think that's asking too much. And like I said, it's just about how you approach it, how you say it, how you communicate into the people. And I've done this with rooms of literally being the only black person in the room. I'm talking about the max number I've had was about 50 people. And I mean, you had people crying. You had people that just, they didn't know how to take the information. But one thing I can say is they were at least comfortable enough to ask me afterwards, come and talk to me afterwards, individually. And we were able to have a conversation. Like I had a guy actually ask me, do I believe that Egyptians actually had dark skin or they were of color. And I was, as crazy as that might have sounded to me, I could have reacted totally different, but I'm just like 100%. You know, and you know, I understand that might be something that you might differ with, but I tell you what, why don't you go and check out this information? Why don't you go and look here for this information? Why don't you pursue other avenues and really research what's going on? Because you'll find out that we're actually closer to each other than you think.
I'm with you. I'm with you. I just know
it's just
you do that kind of stuff.
You gotta come correct.
I agree with that. Go ahead. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to say, like, kind of going back to what I said, and that's when you said what's one thing that people can come together on, and I said pain and suffering, is that because in the way that I see it, and because I get that there's a lot of other layers to this, but that is the one thing that as a human race that we connect with, that takes all the layers off, that takes the race talk off, and that's how you're able to kind of hook into that connection. But that there is not always, you know, opportunity for that to always happen, and I get that. But when you find that sense of relation with someone that's not sometimes about like the tense topic, then you can open up people's ears, and that's at least from what I understood what you were saying, where you're able to really give someone that information now. That you're able to, and it's not like, I don't mean in like a game, but like to grasp their attention, like, oh yeah, no, I have my own experience with that. So let me see what theirs is like, and they're not comparable. No one's trauma is ever comparable by any means. And it all looks different. But that's the conversation we're going to have, is that all this is the same, but it looks different.
So are we talking about one-on-ones with individuals? Or are we talking about, like, you know, it sounds like, you know, Bass, you've been engaging people in like large forums. Is that more practical? Or Sarah, what about you? Are you thinking that it's more?
I think you can do both. I mean, because if I were to bring it back into the sense of my profession, I've got my individual sessions and I got my group therapy sessions. Group therapy is sometimes more beneficial than an individual session because it gives people the opportunity to listen and move at their own speed, so they can still hear the information and not have to, you know, they can take their time with it and they don't have to like feel like on the spot, because, you know, we're sensitive beings, like whether you want to admit it or not. I mean, that's at least the way I see it. And so I think it can happen in both. In my experience, like, I'm working in the prison system, you can there's a lot of people in there willing to listen. So I went and I spoke at an event where there wasn't a whole lot of exchange. I was a speaker on a panel, and it was for a Black MBA event. I was not the only white person there, but I was definitely the minority at that point. And I spoke on fear and suffering, and those, like, because the concept and the talk was about mental health, but in order to get people to talk about mental health, you have to find something that they're going to relate to it. Everybody can relate to fear, and everybody can relate to suffering. And I had more people come to me, I'm not boasting or anything, but more people come to me at the end of that talk and saying, like, oh, that made a lot of sense. Does it mean that they know exactly what to do quite yet? No. But then that will start to form once you actually get people to the table. So regardless of where you have it, whether it be at a gas station, whether it be at a professional event, whether it be, I don't know, the grocery store, if you have the opportunity, just try to find something that you can bridge that gap with.
So basically, just pull people to the side and be like, "Excuse me, sir. Could you be less racist?"
I didn't say that. But I will say I did think about, I was driving home and I was in traffic and I saw this guy in this Ford F-150 double cab with a big old Trump sticker on his bumper. And I looked at him when I went by and I was like,
I can reach that person.
Listen.
Excuse me. Can I have a minute, please? A minute of your time. Yeah.
See, I was cool with trying that in Blacksburg, but I would not do it here. I'm in Mount Airy right now, so I see Confederate flags too much. Like, it was a guy having a whole conversation about how KKK members in the area have been getting arrested, and I'm like, oh, I don't need to be doing this around here because I at least had some level of coverage. You know what I'm saying? At Blacksburg, I don't have nothing here.
But
so
Rebecca's up in New York. So I mean, Rebecca, do you feel this strategy would be effective?
In New York, rural New York, not so much. You get a little scapegoated. I get a little scapegoated. I have a "Hate will not make us great" bumper sticker, peace sign, all this stuff on the back of my van. Mm-hmm. I actually saw in my rear view mirror this dude and his son take a picture with their phone of the back of my car, cracking up, laughing. And I was like pissed. I was like flipping them off at the side, like, I saw you. Like,
so I guess that's part of what, when we're talking about Civil War, we're talking about like the lines in the sand. Yeah, I know what I'm trying to say. Like, so when you're in the city, when you're in these urban enclaves,
there's a lot of Trump.
Yeah, you don't have to deal whenever we're in these urban areas. You don't have to deal with that kind of, you may have some Trump supporters in, urban New York or whatever, but yeah, only whenever you go out to the country do you have like, Trump supporters, like, and they're like deep there, like
big time.
Exactly, like we're meeting and going to MAGA rallies and shit.
Talk to you about politics.
Yeah, like they don't go. I mean,
poor
like
clients.
Trump doesn't go to downtown New York to hold a rally. Trump doesn't go to Chocolate City, Atlanta to have a rally. Trump doesn't go to San Francisco to have a rally. Trump goes to the middle of nowhere and holds it in some fucking, barn arena type situation that normally doubles as a location for rodeos.
One of them metal put together.
Exactly.
He knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, he's
popping place.
Exactly.
That's where, you have to be smart. He's smart enough to, someone in his entourage is smart enough to know how to target the people who have not had access to the perspective of how society has grown into something different than what we've already done. And I mean, they're just disconnected. I mean, even in mental health, people don't even have sometimes enough gas money to get from their house to a bigger city. So they don't even get access to services. So now you see mental health services, like we doing a lot more outreach. You see teletherapy trying to help bridge those gaps. At least I can speak for my profession. Like, I mean, it's growing, but yeah. So I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
No, but so what you're saying is essentially we need like a Meals on Wheels, but for like therapists. Like y'all go out there into
Well, we have them. That's like, this is where most of those services, I can, because I'm in private practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Private insurance, this opens a whole nother conversation in itself, does not, from my understanding, does not pay for any type of service that's not in a one place of business. So if I do anything outside of my house, I'm not getting paid. Your Medicaid dollars and your state funding and your federal funding is where those programs are trying to help bridge the gap, but they're not funded. You can, I mean, or they're underfunded to the point where you kind of doing more work than you're getting paid for, and then people get burnt out, and we leave the profession because it's too much to hold. So it is happening. And then I'm hoping, with the, if technology is going to do something for us, maybe with the growth of technology, then that's where I said this platform is great to be able to get this conversation out there. We're all having an open conversation, and we've noted our differences, and no one's reacted yet. So whoever's watching this can see that it's possible to start doing this. But then, I was thinking too, Rebecca, with what you said, is if your parents are so reactive, that is probably, it's very difficult to not react on that. But that's something that I would say would definitely impact the talk and the conversation, is if, you could get your ability to react more of in a control when it comes to these things. They're just going to be out there reacting to nothing, and then they're going to look stupid, and they're not going to, they'll be like, oh,
right,
what was I doing in the first place? So let me actually listen to her. So it's time, but I personally believe it's possible. I believe
that's easier said than done, for sure, because these are the people who raised me, so they know what to say. You know what I mean? But I do need to work on that for sure.
So basically, I mean,
don't we all though?
It's kind of horrible to think that they
don't we all?
That.
Like, yeah. I've had my a fair share of overreaction, so it happens.
Yeah.
Our prime territory here is the follow up. If we can just acknowledge that we do this stuff, like, all right, hey, I'm not going to shame myself. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to move forward, and if I have to talk about it, I will. But if we perpetuate our own shame cycles, then we're not getting anywhere.
What were you saying,
yeah,
Bass?
that's true.
I was going to say, I think for me, the best experience has been with the groups, but at the same time, you shouldn't go in there with an expectation of how many people you're going to have. Just create the space, know what you want to talk about, and be blunt about it. And whoever shows up, shows up. And, and you'd be surprised how many people are open and willing to have the conversation. They just don't know how. So when you present yourself as someone who can handle the conversation and facilitate it, they're going to be available. And they're going to show up. You just got to market it. You got to let people know, and you got to make that space. And, I mean, the easier it is for them, the easier it is for you. That's just how it works. It's just like when you go to the grocery store. They make it very simple for you to find what you need in the store. Whether they have people to help you get there, or whether they point you in that direction with some marketing. The same thing applied to these conversations. And when you have groups, like what I was saying with the press release, you bring these groups in, and you got this. Let's say you get 6 people, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to already have at least 5 to 7 questions already set up and ready to ask anybody, not the whole group. But what you're gonna do is put it on paper. Split everybody up into those groups of 3 if you got 6. Try to do it as evenly as possible. And then when they come in, don't make it so that you got to pick the group during the event. Give them some different color stickers when they walk in, so that whoever walks in, they get that color. Whoever walks in next, they get the other color. Like, it's random, it's non-biased, and it creates that space totally for you to be comfortable as well, because there's nothing worse than having to sit there and think about your own bias and have to try to interact with your own bias in picking the groups.
Okay.
That's gonna put you out there, and then you can get yourself in some trouble with the conversation then, because then people are gonna pick up on that. So eliminate the bias off gate. This is what it is. As soon as you come in, get you a sticker. Go ahead and sit down, get you some food. Let's eat. You know, people are gonna talk as they eat. They're already gonna be connecting with each other as they eat. They're there in the same room. So in turn, once everything starts, initiate it with a brief conversation, a short video, just to set the tone for the conversation. And I promise you, that conversation is gonna go from farming to, I mean, the most unorthodox things that make sense. Because the conversation isn't just about food. It isn't just about agriculture. This is just a catalyst to get everybody warmed up for the conversation. Because essentially, like I said, race is at the root of the issue. So and if we don't get down to that, then we can never get to the problems that we have within agriculture.
So how aggressive? I mean, I agree with what you're saying, and I think it would be a very, very effective tactic, to have these conversations over, a hot plate. I have no doubt that would be effective. I guess the question is, and the same question exists for you, regardless of whether you're talking about a small forum or a large forum. How do we get these people in the room at this point without them thinking like it's some liberal conspiracy to turn them gay? What do we do?
Call it dialogue on race. They already doing it in Virginia, in rural Virginia. And I mean, Blacksburg is pretty rural. I mean, it's a college town, but there's a lot of rural around it. Everything else, Christiansburg, all of that stuff in between, Radford, that's all rural. And I mean, we had all kinds of people, all kinds of backgrounds coming to these meetings, and they were coming on campus. Okay. So, I mean, if you create that within the community and put it in a spot where everybody can access, then, like I said, whoever shows up. Then you do it again.
So you're saying we should have large...
It's really a learning experience.
We should have large...
It depends on the community.
We should have large, continued public forums where people are forced to engage. I guess that's another thing too. Is like, should we have these public forums initially where we are catering to their perceptions, catering to their understandings in regard to race and sexuality? Like I don't think I could go into rural Virginia, rural New York, and be like, okay, all you people who don't see me as one of you, now we're going to talk about race. Do you feel like we need to have avatars or basically, people of that space, who go into those spaces and begin that dialogue, and then we start merging those different things together?
Yes. Okay. So the other part of the dialogue on race program that they usually do up there, it's like what they do is they already have these organizations in place. They all focus on these different areas of what racism affects, from education to social justice to food, everything. And these people are the ones that organize it. So whoever comes to the program, which is most of the community, there's already people, like myself, that are already in place. But there's also people that are white as well. So everybody's in the same space, and it's not like it's not like just me and all white people. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't expect it to be like that. I would definitely invite the people that I know about this issue and can have a conversation about this issue to come as well, because their take on this is going to help everybody else understand what's going on. Because it wouldn't make sense to have 3 Trump supporters sitting at the same table having this conversation if there's nobody to even offer their side. Yeah. So that's my mistake on not mentioning that. But you definitely want to have people in place to come as well. It's not like I would just do this by myself. That's pretty much where the approach that I feel like it has to take. Like, you got to have someone to be the moderator for each of the groups, or you can already have leaders set up for each group. Like, say I invite okay, with the 6 people, right? Let's say I invite my professor from Virginia Tech, and she's white. So I already know how she thinks, and I know how she is. So having her as one of the moderators and then myself as a moderator for the 3 and the 3, we're the ones offering the questions and we're the ones kind of helping to facilitate the conversation. And we interject as needed. But it's really more so getting the information, being able to articulate the information in between dialogue of those questions.
Okay.
And in those questions, you get understanding from all points of views. Because, like, I could maybe talk about my own personal experience in that and just be like, well, you know, my experience has been this. But it's not to say that I disagree with this person on how they think and how they feel. It's just me simply saying what has happened to me and telling them my experience, and I learn from theirs. And then we can go from there. They are able to make that decision. We can't make them make that decision. We can't make anybody change who they feel should be the president, who they feel should be vice president. We can't do any of that. And that's the one thing that I think will fail at if we go into these conversations doing. We can't expect to change anybody. What you can do is create an atmosphere for it,
Okay.
as best as possible.
What do you think, Sarah?
I was just honestly agreeing with it. I just say it differently, but that's kind of where I say about, you know, bringing your lane. If you talk in your perspective, you talk within your experience, your own vulnerability and honesty about your experience, then you can create more of a platform than trying to tell someone else about theirs. And that's where, like, you know, staying in your lane and you bring yourself right up to the other person's lane and you ask questions, you seek to understand about how, you know, how they have come to form their own perspective too. I think it's not exactly what he's saying, but at least that's how I'm connecting. They're very similar in that sense, is that, you know, you can't overstep and force someone to be anything different from, you know, what they experience. And you can only kind of, lack of better terms, do you, and if hopefully create an atmosphere that someone will ask you if they're curious enough, and you stay curious enough to promote the concept of curiosity in order to promote that in someone else.
So, Rebecca, would you be willing to coordinate a meeting? Because maybe it's a situation because you're familiar with your mother and father, they feel comfortable, like, you know, taking this intimidating stance against you whenever you voice your opinions. But do you think if we held, like, you know, these racial intervention type deals where it's more general, where you basically set up a forum and there's, like, you know, 4 or 5 different people, you know, in a room having a discussion, and then you bring your parents into that situation, do you think they would be more, you know, reserved and more open and more receptive?
Oh, they wouldn't scream and be in your face. I don't think they'd be comfortable.
Would they go?
Quieter. When it wasn't with me, just me, you know. They may come away from it feeling another certain way about me for knowing people like this. Like, I don't know. But they're gonna be moving, like, soon. I'm not gonna really be dealing with them on a regular basis anymore. So.
Well, that means, hey, Skylar, how you doing?
What?
Where are they moving to? I'm just curious.
I don't want to eat my
Montana. Where
I ate some of my.
I was like, it'd be super ironic if they say like Florida, North Carolina. I was like, because then they're definitely gonna get a taste of their own.
Well, I mean, I guess since they're getting ready to move to Montana, there is an opportunity there for you to, you know, to experiment, because if it fucks up, they're gone to Montana. There's no consequences. You can just basically, you know, be like, oh, bye. Sorry, it didn't work out.
I have family members too.
By yourself, though.
I have family members too, where I might be moving eventually to Arizona, where I have a brother-in-law and my sister. I posted something about, I don't understand, like, how you could still be supporting Trump. We need to boycott these businesses. I got, like, a really insulted response from him. So, why, if you know we're not all bad, why do you keep talking about us like we're bad? You know what I mean? Like, and I don't mean to come across like they're all bad people,
But I'm trying to understand, like, why do you not see him for what he is? Like, why would you still support somebody who talks the way he talks and acts the way he acts? And the only reason I can think is you're comfortable with it because it doesn't affect you at all. Like, it doesn't affect you at all. You know me, I'm like a single mom. I don't have a lot of income. I have mixed children. It might affect me more, and maybe that's why I can see it a little better.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't start off like that. We started off the same. You know what I'm saying? So
I guess that's the biggest question at the end of the day for me too, is, you know, it's not so much like, I feel like we have some pretty sound solutions, and I agree with everything that's been said today by everybody here in regard to like things that we can do to help when we get the people in the room, but then it comes down to like how do we get the people in the room, like, you know, because if you have, you know, I acknowledge the fact that there is privilege that's afforded to individuals in our society based off of the hierarchies that we create. Race is one of those things that grants privilege. Wealth is one of those things that grants privilege. Sex is one of those things that grants privilege. Sexual orientation is one of those things that grants privilege. And so it's difficult whenever you're trying to convince somebody to, you know, like, I mean, as a heterosexual male, it's like, you know, okay, I have to put myself and force myself into situations that, you know, may not be, you know, familiar to me, may be strange, you know, to acknowledge what my privilege has done for me as a heterosexual male. There's other areas where I have disadvantages, but yeah, I recognize, like, as a heterosexual male, you know, I don't have to worry. When I go out on a date, I don't worry about where I'm going to take, you know, somebody that I'm dating, you know, in regard to, like, if I hold my partner's hand, are people going to look at me funny? I don't worry about that kind of shit. But I know that there's people who have to go through that struggle, and I know that because I've interacted with those people, and I force myself to put myself into situations where I interact with those people who go through that struggle. But whenever you're dealing with people who are dealing with who receive an advantage from their status or their station in life, and they perceive that elevating people to that same station is going to cause them to lower in recognition, you know, it's very difficult to say, come here and give us some of your privilege. Come here and let us talk about how we need to address your privilege. I'll be like, fuck it, I'm making, you know, $100,000 extra a year because, you know, I'm a man and, you know, I'm a Christian and I'm a heterosexual or whatever. Why would I contribute toward, you know, upending that? That's my issue. I think is the biggest concern.
Well, money is such a sensitive topic. People we get super, super weird. I don't really know what like, just weird. Like, emotion starts flying everywhere. And I can't really, I'm going to put this out there, and I'm going to go ahead and put a disclaimer. It's not the most well thought out thought, but just something for discussion. Maybe another point is that, like, you know, a lot of the conversation that happens, if personalization and emotion gets involved in it, it's because the subject has not been separated from the object, if that makes sense. So, like, I mean, I guess in context, it would be like, you know, when people talk about money, people's energy, and they have worked for that money. So if you start attacking money, then they take that as their worth, if that makes sense. So if there's any kind of opportunity for this conversation, or when these conversations happen, to separate any kind of the object from the subject, so like someone's opinion or someone's behavior from their person's worth, you may have a better chance of being able to have them hear you, because that personalization is just an automatic, like, trigger to shut down. And that's where, like, the conversations will go ahead and stop. And, you know, after a certain point in time, you're going to get tired of trying to reopen the conversation, even as much as, you know, like, it can't be tiptoed around, like, because if we avoid it, then it's going to get worse. So,
what were you going to say, Rebecca?
You know, so, like, a lot of people that consider themselves right-wing, okay, will look at someone on the left and say, you have failed at some point. That's why you're on the left. You want to be given everything. You don't want to work. Yet a lot of people who consider themselves Democrat work probably harder than they do. and still don't. Like, I can attest to that. Like, as a mom who's single, like, trying to survive, if you knew, like, how much I work or how hard I work, and then to come at me with an insult like, I failed, this is my fault, I need to just take my whatever licks that I get for being a single mom. They don't even understand my story. I was married. I was in a relationship. I didn't have all these kids with 5 different men, but the first thing they assume, oh, I'm sorry, I have to answer this.
Okay, all right, Bass. I'm gonna let you. We're at the 8 o'clock mark, but I'm gonna let Bass have the last word on it.
I was gonna actually respond to something she said about, you know, we like I said, we looking at differences a lot, you know, and we can't assume everybody is always different. But to be honest with you, there's probably more white people on public assistance than black people. I mean, I even see that here in Mount Airy. You know, it's not a lot of us here, and you know, what I do see is a lot of white people, and I live in public housing.
Mm-hmm. I think in North Carolina just had a huge bust of like welfare abuse, and every single person was white, and I was like, finally, shit.
So I mean, you know, I look at that kind of thing, and I'm just kind of like, you know, all they need is a little clarification. You know, show them the hard facts, and all of that odd thought and weird perceptions of people, all that stuff goes out the window, you know, if you just don't feed into it. Because at the end of the day, we're out here seeking the truth. And to me, what I've noticed is those who wish to be complacent don't go looking for anything else outside of where they are. Anyone that I can honestly say, you know, if somebody is racist, they're either because they want to be, or they have no clue and don't want to know a clue.
Yeah.
But that still goes back to them wanting to be where they are, and that is racist.
Right.
So, you know, it's just a matter of having the conversation and understanding where everybody stands. I don't have a problem with you if you're racist. What I do have a problem with is if you are racist and you're pretending like you're not.
True.
I'd rather you just be straight up and be like, hey, I don't like you niggas. I might feel some kind of way that it came out that way. Yeah. But hey, at least I know where you stand. And you know, and that's just where I am. You know, that's just me as a person. That's how I operate on a daily basis. Because I mean, we gotta survive out here, man. Like, I don't have time to be sitting here trying to argue with nobody that don't want to. That's content.
I got you. Okay.
My father, you know, he's a veteran. He was in Vietnam, and I don't understand for the life of me why he really got into it with me about Trump one time. But you know what I learned? Don't get into it with family, because what you're gonna do is waste your time and your breath. Because half the time they're gonna cut you off because they're way too close to you to be having that kind of conversation. They know too much about you to be having that conversation. They've had way too long of a relationship with you to have that conversation. I need to talk to these people out here in this world, and then maybe my parents will catch on and be like, hey, what's he doing? He's making impacts. Maybe I need to be impacted too. Because then they're going to realize their friends are being impacted by their son who tried to have that conversation. So, I mean, you know, it's a trickle-down effect or a trickle-up, whichever way you want to call it.
It's trickling.
We all on the same page when you think about it.
We all trickling.
Yeah, man, trickle.
Trickle. It was good talking to all y'all tonight.
Yeah, man.
But thanks for all. I think this is probably the best show that we've had. So like, yeah, like it feels like the more of us, the more the energy. Yeah, I know it gets kind of crazy. Everybody's got stuff going on or whatever. But yeah, no, I'm happy we all were able to link up and do this. So yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. And I'm just gonna go ahead and shut it down. Talk to you later.
Good talking to y'all.
You want me to send that document to you?
Yes. Send me the document and I will link it. I'll put it into the link for the video. I got you.
I'll send the video as well too, y'all.
All right, I'll post it.
All right, y'all have a good night.
You too.
Y'all too. Nice talking to you.
Peace.
Guys.